Subscribe because it's free.
The Varaxi believed they were the pinnacle of evolution. Flesh was weak, a primitive remnant of lesser beings. True strength lay in precision of metal, the endurance of machinery, and the flawless calculations of cybernetic minds. For centuries, they had dominated the galactic core, crushing lesser species under the weight of their superiority. Every advancement they made stripped away more of their organic selves, replacing fragile biology with steel, circuits, and processors. To them, it wasn't augmentation. It was purification. Their empire had expanded without resistance. Every new species encountered was tested, challenged to prove their worth. The rules were simple, a trial of strength, intelligence, and endurance. The winners became allies, absorbing Varaxi technology. The losers, well, there had never been a winner. Every species fell, their biological limitations exposed under the cold efficiency of cybernetic perfection. The Varaxi had never lost. When their scouts discovered Earth, there was no question about the outcome. It was an insignificant planet on the outer edge of a backwater system, inhabited by soft, organic beings with no visible enhancements. The Varaxi scanned them, searching for integrated technology, neural augmentations, biomechanical systems. They found nothing. It was almost laughable. These creatures weren't even in the early stages of cybernetic evolution. They relied entirely on their weak, organic bodies. How had they even made it to space? Still, the rules had to be followed. A challenge was issued. The Varaxi would face the best of humanity in combat, strategy, and endurance. It was tradition, a ritual before inevitable conquest. Humanity would struggle, perhaps even surprise them in small ways, but the outcome was already decided. No organic species had ever stood against the might of cybernetic perfection. The Varaxi leader, Primarch Zorval, stood before his council as the challenge was sent. "We are not merely testing them," he said. "We are proving once again that the path of flesh is obsolete. Let this be the final lesson for the unaugmented." On Earth, the message arrived like an impossible dream. A towering Varaxi dreadnought appeared in the skies, its presence an undeniable statement of power. The challenge was broadcast to every major government, every scientific body, every military force. The world stood still. Most believed it was a joke, an elaborate hoax. The idea of being tested, judged by an alien empire, was absurd, but the evidence was undeniable. The Varaxi were real, and their challenge was absolute. If humanity refused, it would be seen as surrender. If they lost, Earth would be absorbed. Its people forced into servitude under the rule of a species that saw them as little more than unmodified animals. Debates raged in war rooms and conference halls. Some argued for diplomacy, for negotiation, but there was no room for that. The Varaxi didn't negotiate with the weak. They only recognized power. There was only one path forward. 3 champions were chosen. For combat, a soldier, not the most heavily armed or armored, but the most experienced, a man who had fought in the worst conditions Earth had to offer. His name didn't matter. His ability did. For intelligence, a strategist, a grandmaster of both war games and real battles, a mind sharpened by unpredictability and intuition. Against a machine-like intelligence, humanity needed creativity. For endurance, a survivalist, someone who had pushed past every limit, surviving in the harshest environments on Earth with nothing but knowledge, instinct, and willpower. The Varaxi believed cybernetics made them unbreakable. Humanity would prove them wrong. The Varaxi were amused by the selections. These humans still clung to their organic frailty, believing it was enough to challenge perfection. It wouldn't be. The trials would be held aboard the Varaxi War Station, a technological marvel orbiting a dead star. Here, the contest would be free of environmental advantages, free of any bias, a pure test of superiority. The Varaxi believed the results were inevitable. Their warriors had crushed armies with a single blow. Their strategists could process 1 billion calculations per second. Their endurance was beyond question. Why fear pain when your nerves could simply be deactivated? Why fear hunger when synthetic energy sustained you indefinitely? The challenge was a formality, nothing more. Yet, for the first time in Varaxi history, there was hesitation, not fear, not doubt, but something unspoken, a whisper in the background of their shared network. Humanity was an unknown variable. They had no enhancements, no cybernetic integrations, no machine augmentations, and yet, somehow, they had reached the stars, without metal in their bones, without processors in their skulls, without replacing the weak flesh they were born with. They had still managed to carve their own path across the void. How? It was a question no one wanted to ask, but it lingered nonetheless. The Varaxi had conquered species with cybernetic advancements that dwarfed what these humans possessed. How could a species so untouched by technological evolution survive in a galaxy ruled by the strong? The answer would come soon enough. The humans were already on their way. The Varaxi War Station hung in the void, a monolithic construct of metal and energy, orbiting the lifeless remnants of a collapsed star. It was a testament to their technological superiority, a place where organic imperfections were stripped away and replaced with the precision of cybernetics. The station had hosted countless trials, and none had ever ended in a Varaxi defeat. The human shuttle arrived, dwarfed by the immense scale of the Varaxi architecture. The champions of Earth stepped forward, their expressions unreadable, their movements slow and deliberate. No cybernetic enhancements, no neural uplinks, no augmented limbs, just flesh and bone. To the Varaxi, it was almost offensive. Pre-March Zorval stood at the head of the delegation, his silver-plated body gleaming under the station's artificial lighting. His voice carried the weight of centuries of conquest. You understand the terms. 3 challenges, 3 contests of superiority. Should you fail, humanity will submit to Varaxi rule. The human leader, a composed diplomat chosen to speak for Earth, met his gaze without flinching. And if we win, a ripple of amusement passed through the Varaxi ranks. The question itself was absurd. Zorval's cybernetic eye whirred as he scanned the humans once more, confirming what he already knew. Weak, unmodified, doomed. If you win, he said, then the Varaxi will recognize humanity as an equal power. He said it without concern. It had never happened. It would never happen. The 3 human champions stepped forward. The Varaxi warriors studied them with calculated indifference. The first was a soldier, dressed in simple combat gear, his stance relaxed but alert. The second was a strategist, a woman whose mind had been tested against Earth's best and never broken. The third was a survivalist, a man who had endured conditions that should have killed him, yet stood before them unshaken. They were unremarkable. No reinforced bone structures, no mechanical enhancements to improve reaction time, no neural uplinks for instant information processing, nothing but biology. The Varaxi saw no threat. The first challenge would be combat, a battle between the strongest of the Varaxi and the human soldier. The chosen warrior stepped forward, his body more machine than flesh. Reinforced alloy plating covered his limbs, servos humming with mechanical precision. His movements were fluid, effortless, calculated. His combat systems processed 1,000 scenarios per second, analyzing weaknesses before the fight even began. The human had no armor, no weapons beyond what the Varaxi allowed. It wouldn't matter. The second challenge would be strategy, a test of intellect against the Varaxi's most advanced tactician, a being whose mind had been enhanced with quantum computing, capable of simulating entire wars in real time. The human would rely on raw cognition, intuition, and experience against the precision of artificial intelligence. It was a battle already lost. The third challenge was endurance, a survival trial on the most hostile environment available, a frozen wasteland where temperatures dropped to levels no organic life should withstand. The Varaxi Challenger had a synthetic energy core, immune to hunger, fatigue, or cold. The human had nothing but his instincts. It would be over before it began. The Varaxi observed the humans with amusement, but beneath the surface, something unfamiliar stirred, a quiet curiosity. The humans had come willingly, knowing the odds, knowing the price of failure. Yet, there was no fear in their eyes, no hesitation, no pleading for mercy or negotiation. Just calm, steady resolve. It was unsettling. Zorval dismissed the thought. Organic beings often held on to delusions of hope, even when defeat was certain. It was nothing more than a primitive defense mechanism. The trials would crush that hope soon enough. The combat arena loomed before them, a perfect sphere designed to eliminate external variables. No cover, no terrain advantages, just raw skill and power. The Varaxi warrior stepped in first, his cybernetic arms flexing with unnatural strength. The human followed, rolling his shoulders, shaking out his limbs, every movement loose and practiced. There was no ceremony, no countdown. The fight began the moment the Varaxi moved. And that was when everything changed. The Varaxi warrior lunged, servos hissing as the cybernetic limbs propelled him forward at speeds no organic creature could match. His reinforced fists could shatter reinforced steel. Against unaugmented human bone, it would be instant destruction, a calculated, inevitable victory. But his strike didn't land. The human soldier sidestepped, fast, impossibly fast for someone without enhancements. Not only had he avoided the blow, but he had done so with ease, without wasted motion. The Varaxi's processes adjusted instantly, recalculating the fight, adapting to the unexpected agility. He twisted, bringing his other arm around in a crushing arc. The human moved again, ducking beneath the swing, as if he had seen it coming before it was thrown. A pattern emerged. The Varaxi attacked, and the human avoided. Again. Each movement was efficient, controlled. There was no panic, no scrambling, only precise adjustments. The Varaxi warrior recalibrated his attack algorithms, increasing speed, adjusting angles. It didn't matter. The human was already gone before the strikes landed. And then the human struck back. A single blow, perfectly placed. Not on the armor-plated torso, not on the reinforced limbs. He struck at the exposed servos beneath the Varaxi's shoulder joint, an area no other species had ever recognized as a vulnerability. Sparks flew as the arm jerked, momentarily unresponsive. The crowd of cybernetic observers went silent. The fight continued. The human never met strength with strength. He never blocked. He never wasted energy. Every attack from the Varaxi was sidestepped, redirected, exploited. His movements weren't the result of enhanced reaction speeds or predictive algorithms. They were the product of something far more terrifying: experience. The soldier wasn't just fighting. He was reading, studying, learning. Every feint, every micro-adjustment, every recalibrated attack pattern. It all fed into a deeper understanding of how the Varaxi moved, how they fought, how they thought. He wasn't reacting. He was adapting, faster than any machine ever had. The fight ended when the Varaxi warrior collapsed. Not from damage. His frame was nearly indestructible, but from sheer exhaustion. His processors overheated from the constant recalculations. His synthetic muscles strained from fruitless exertion. The human had barely broken a sweat. For the first time in Varaxi history, a champion had fallen. The cybernetic spectators didn't speak. Their processors were locked in disbelief. This wasn't possible. The human had no enhancements, no artificial systems guiding his movements. Yet he had defeated what was considered an unstoppable force. Pre-March Zorval's expression remained unreadable. A statistical anomaly, he declared, though his words carried less certainty than before. Combat is one aspect of superiority. Intelligence will determine the true victor. The second trial began. The human strategist and the Varaxi tactician sat across from each other. The game before them was not a simple simulation, but a full-scale war scenario, complete with shifting variables, unknowns, and deception. The Varaxi commander's mind was enhanced beyond biological limits. It processed information faster than any organic being. The moment a move was made, it analyzed 1 trillion possible responses, predicting long-term consequences with near-perfect accuracy. The game began, and the Varaxi launched its opening moves. Efficient, precise, mathematically optimal. Its fleets moved like a flawless machine, encircling the human's forces with overwhelming control. There was no opening, no weakness. Then the human moved. Her decisions were illogical. At least, that's how it seemed at first. She made sacrifices that no machine would consider. She ignored optimal defenses in favor of seemingly reckless attacks. To the Varaxi, it looked like desperation, but then patterns began to emerge. The sacrifices weren't random. They were bait. The reckless attacks weren't reckless at all. They forced responses, manipulated the Varaxi's own predictive algorithms against it. It was being forced into scenarios where the best move was, in reality, the worst possible decision. The AI's processors overloaded, recalculating. It adapted, shifting strategy, reworking its predictive models. But the human strategist was always ahead. She wasn't working from calculations alone. She was operating on intuition, creativity, and an understanding of the unseen. While the AI predicted logical moves, she made ones that weren't logical at all, until they were. The Varaxi commander saw the end before it arrived. A final, calculated attempt to break the human strategy, and then the realization. There was no way out. The machine was trapped. The game ended. The human had won. The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't disbelief. It was fear. Cybernetic perfection had failed. Again, pre-March Zorval's metal fingers tightened. This is not over. His voice was quiet, controlled. But beneath it, something ancient stirred. The final challenge would be endurance, the most grueling trial of all. And Varaxi would not lose. The frozen wasteland was a nightmare of ice and wind. The Varaxi had selected this world specifically to crush organic weakness. Temperatures plunged below anything survivable. The air was thin, biting. Nothing lived here. Nothing could. The human and the Varaxi endurance champion were left with nothing but the environment. The cybernetic warrior did not breathe, did not feel cold. His body regulated heat through synthetic means. He required no food, no water. He could remain here indefinitely, unbothered by the planet's hostility. The human had no such advantages. No insulation beyond the clothes on his back. No synthetic core to keep him warm. No augmentation to slow his metabolism or conserve energy. He was just a man. The Varaxi observed with certainty. This was where the anomaly would end. The first hour passed. The human moved with purpose, his body adjusting, conserving heat. He wrapped his clothing tighter, dug into the snow, creating a windbreak. The Varaxi remained motionless, unshaken, letting the environment rage around him. Another hour. The human's breath came in slow, measured intervals. He did not waste energy. He did not panic. He did not shiver. He controlled his body, regulating himself not with machines, but with knowledge, with discipline. The cybernetic warrior processed the data. The human should have been slowing, weakening, yet his vitals, still fully organic, remained stable. More hours passed. The wind screamed. The temperature dropped further. The planet itself sought to kill them both. The Varaxi felt nothing. And yet, something was happening. The human was not weakening. He had built a small shelter using nothing but his surroundings. He had packed snow for insulation, reducing heat loss. He had buried himself just enough to block the wind while keeping an opening for fresh air. The Varaxi observed. Confusion rippled through its processors. The human was not enduring through superior biology. He was enduring through sheer knowledge, through instinct honed over generations of survival. More time passed. The Varaxi began to register fluctuations in its systems. Its core, though stable, was running calculations at an increased rate. The winds were growing stronger. Ice was accumulating. A full-body freeze was forming across its metal joints. Normally, this wouldn't matter. But the planet's conditions were extreme, even by cybernetic standards. The human had adjusted. The Varaxi had not. Minutes stretched into hours. Then, for the first time, the cybernetic endurance champion felt something unfamiliar. Strain. The ice had locked portions of its limbs. Microfractures formed where the cold had pushed metal beyond its calculated limits. The machine's body was not designed to adapt. It was designed to resist. And in resisting, it had unknowingly allowed the planet to consume it. The human? He was still there, breathing steadily. Calm. Alive. The moment the Varaxi warrior attempted to move and failed, the silence of the observers was absolute. The human stood up, shaking off the frost, his body slow but still responsive. The Varaxi had no such luxury. The cold had won. The human had endured. The final trial was over. The war station was silent. The gathered Varaxi had never seen defeat, never imagined it. The concept itself was foreign. The humans, unaugmented and unmodified, had surpassed them, not by brute strength, not by superior technology, but by something no cybernetic system had ever accounted for: instinct, adaptability, willpower. The human champions stood before pre-March Zorval. Their faces were calm. They had known the outcome before the trials even began. The Varaxi leader stared at them, his cybernetic mind processing a truth it had never been forced to acknowledge. His people had always believed they had evolved past the need for flesh, past the weakness of organic existence. But these humans, they had never needed enhancements to be superior. They had always been superior, not in strength, not in intelligence, not in endurance alone, but in something deeper. Zorval's voice, for the first time, lacked certainty. "We have miscalculated." The human diplomat nodded. "Yes, you have." The Varaxi had spent centuries replacing their flesh with machines, believing perfection lay in the removal of weakness. But in doing so, they had lost something vital: the ability to change, to adapt, to survive against impossible odds. They had become machines, predictable, efficient, but machines to be outthought, outmaneuvered, outlasted. And in the face of something unpredictable, something human, they had crumbled. For the first time in history, the Varaxi recognized an equal, and for the first time, they understood why they had never truly been invincible.